Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It with Taylor Nolan, a podcast focused on mental health, relationships, dating and sex, and all-around personal development where, honestly, no topic is off limits. I'm your host, Taylor Nolan, a former reality TV star, practicing psychotherapist, and future certified sex therapist. Welcome to episode 102, where we will be discussing how to be intentional about how you eat and how you drink. We'll be talking about gender equality in the restaurant industry and talking about overcoming gender stereotypes and staying authentic to yourself in relationships. Ooh, some really interesting, good conversations with my dear friend, Chef Romain, that I super enjoyed. So with all of this said, let's talk about it. All right, I am here today with Chef Romain Avril, and we're going to discuss a few things that we haven't actually ever covered on the podcast before, from plant-based diet to sexism in the restaurant industry to mocktails and living a sober lifestyle. Chef Romain initially discovered his passion for cooking at the early age of 13. He is actually from Paris. He was born there. And at the age of 17 was already working at Michelin star restaurants. And in 2010 is actually when he moved to Canada and was then the executive chef for renowned restaurants. And since then, he has now opened several restaurants, including La Velle, Goldie Bar, and Narada here in Toronto. He is also the Canadian ambassador for Nespresso and Monogram. He appears on several different TV segments and shows, as well as on the Food Network, and is currently opening a few restaurants, as well as writing a vegan cookbook. So I'm really excited to chat about some of this stuff, and welcome to the show, Romain. Thank you so much for coming. Initially, I think I want to start off a little bit about what got you interested in cooking in the first place.
Yeah, I think, well, thanks for having me, first of all.
Yeah.
I think it's one of these things that I always knew. You know, you don't really think about it. It's not like when I'm tall and big and strong, I want to be, I don't know, like a policeman or whatever. Well, me, it was like, I want to be a chef. So I think I always loved food. Eating it, obviously. Also being in France, I was very surrounded with beautiful produce. My parents were cooking at home, my family. So you're kind of like surrounded by good things. And I don't know, I just, it was like a calling, really.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm always curious when it comes to food, because food is such an emotional thing.
100%.
And I've talked about a little bit of my journey to being plant-based, but as a chef, I mean, you've worked with all different kinds of food, I'm assuming, and curious when you first started off, if there was something really specific that you were like, this is what I'm going to specialize in, or this is the specific kind of food I want to do, or if you're just kind of open.
Yeah, I think it's something that really evolves through your journey. Obviously, I started in France, so we were cooking very heavily with protein, butter, and cream, so super, super like heavy and fatty type of cooking. But then I moved to the UK. And I worked, actually before that, I did my degree in Chinese culinary. So I already had like an exposition to a different type of in a way of eating.
Okay.
So then I moved to the UK and I worked in a 2 Michelin star that was doing French Asian. And it's a little different in the sense that you still do the techniques from the French cooking, but you the way of eating is completely different. It's more like the Asian approach, where you're already cutting down on the fats, you're cutting down on the proteins. So it was really kind of like a first approach of like a different way of like eating, and you don't need to eat as much protein as you'd think you would.
I mean, I already have questions now about how much protein we should, quote unquote, be eating, and especially thinking about plant-based diets and the big conversation around not getting enough protein when you're plant-based.
Well, I think it's also everyone's different to begin with. It's something that I've said, and I will say in the book. It's you don't particularly have to go literally 100 to 0 and be like, no, I'm eating beef every day, and that's no, I can only eat tofu. To really be cliche.
Yeah.
But I think it has to be progressive, and it has to be adapted to how you feel. I think that would be like how you can be successful
Yeah.
with it. Now, in terms of like need, I think your body tells you. You know, I don't think you have to go by, oh, well, on internet they said, or like that person told me. I think you really have to go with the flow and reduce very slowly from, I think 30% of your diet is something somewhere you should be happy with, unless you want to go completely plant-based and you want to remove protein, like animal protein from your diet, then yes, you got to go zero. But I think for like where I am in my life and when I'm trying to like convince people at least to go on, is like a 30-70%.
Okay. Yeah. Like 30% animal protein and 70% plant-based.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. I'm wondering if you can kind of share with us a little bit more, just like step by step, I guess, of what your journey was to getting to that 70-30% and like, I mean, how long that would have taken and like things you learned along the way, if that's like a really difficult place to get to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely not easy. I mean, like, I think the first thing I stopped was really eating steaks.
Yeah.
That's like that. I don't know why. I think it's maybe because it's so powerful and, you know, like the blood and the steak, it's got like a big, like stamp into like the, like, you know, a carnivore diet. So I think that's the one thing that I pretty much like stopped eating. And it was actually very easy. Don't get me wrong. Like actually last night I was just like craving it. And it, you know, it's like everything when it's like an addiction, because it is in a way. That's like the hardest one. But then, so I stopped red meat, first of all, and then it turned out to be easy. I don't feel like I'm weak. I don't feel like I'm dying. So, I mean, you know, like that's a good thing.
Do you feel like less of a man?
Not at all. I mean, and that's the thing. I think I don't know why. It's I think it's like everything. Like our society is run based on cliche, and it's something that we'll talk about later. But no, I mean, like I feel great. Like every morning, my breakfast is like a vegan shake, and you know what? Like I would have mocked myself 10 years ago, but now I'm like I feel great. So like I don't care.
Yeah. So it's also perhaps a certain level of comfortability with yourself to not necessarily allow those gender stereotypes play a role in your diet.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's like everything. I think as a person, you have to like accept your sexuality. You have to accept like who you are as a person and be like strong and love yourself. And I think once you do that, you can literally pretty much like take on like anything. I think to me, this is like, and it sounds weird to associate that with food. Or like drinking, you know, it's the same thing. I was just like, I don't want to drink. Well, you're a man. You should have a scotch in front of you. I'm like, I know what? I'm happy with an orange juice. You know what I mean? And it's just like all this like cliche that you have to fight, which could be difficult and can be made difficult by others. But when you have a strong personality and strong beliefs, you can shut it down pretty easily. I was just like, I don't really care what you say. It doesn't going to change. It's not going to force me into anything.
I'm curious if any part of that is like your French personality, or if that I don't really know French culture, so I could just totally be pulling that on my ass. But I don't know. I think definitely some people just have like naturally like bold personalities.
No, for sure. I mean, like definitely being French, it's like it's probably part of in my gene. But I was not like that. I think I would have said a Canadian actually, like give me, because it's funny because we say Canadian is so nice and polite and whatever, but at the same time, like living in Toronto, it's also like pretty like ruthless.
Yeah. It's kind of like a New York vibe.
It does, Toronto. And like in a mini way for sure. And then like also my industry, which is hospitality, is very strong and it's cutthroat, so you have to be. I mean, if you want to make moves, then you have to be like strong, and you have to just, and again, like stop caring about what other people have to say and just care about like what you want and for yourself.
And that I think is just a really important message all around in life.
Yeah,
because
100%.
If you're living your life in a way to please others or to, you know, try to blend in with other people, you're likely not living a very authentic life to yourself.
100%. I agree. And exactly. And I think I always like talk about hospitality because this is like what I know. But at the same time, like literally everything can be replicated to any industry or to any people. I mean, like live your life the way you want it.
Yeah. And I want to get a little bit into the ethical reasons, the scientific reasons, to how you started this more plant-based diet.
So absolutely. So I think it's a lot to do with, as you said, like ethical reasons and also sustainability. It's actually before plant-based, I was talking a lot about like ethical process of like raising animals.
Yeah.
And also sustainability. I think that's something that's been like around for a little longer than plant-based has been.
Yeah.
So something that people are more aware of and are more inclined to listen to.
Yeah. People are definitely more ready to be like, oh, is that is that free range?
Yes,
than
exactly.
just totally not
100%,
looking at it.
100%. So that's kind of like how it started. And I kind of like used that to branch out into the diet, into my personal life, as well as explaining why, and then try to convince people. Although like my job is not to convince anyone. But like, I mean, when you have beliefs, you're always going to try to argue about them, right? So, I was trying to tell people, like, don't buy from, like, huge farms that are, like, the cows or the chicken never seen the light of the day.
Tyson or Purdue.
Yes. So try to go local and try to go small farms. And that's where you kind of, like, people start to understand sustainability. And I'm like, okay, but that's just one step. I'm like, now let's say you eat from a local farm, but you eat 2 pounds of beef every day out of that small farm.
Yeah.
Yes, your meat is sustainable, but your diet isn't.
Yeah.
And this is kind of like how I'm trying to use that whole... It's almost like speaking to a child, right? You have to like... When people are so stuck in their way, you have to like try to trick them. And that's kind of how I approach it, like sustainability through and being ethical. And then just kind of like trying to approach that, like including that plant-based diet into that lifestyle.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, we say child here, but you're also having to totally relearn your food system, your food preferences, educate yourself on your food.
Yeah.
So it really is a relearning that happens that, I mean, makes sense. You would kind of approach that from more of a,
but with like even more stubborn, that do not want to go anywhere because there's no one to, tap their wrist if they do wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious what kind of pushback you have gotten or perhaps you would get when you would share and discuss, this plant-based diet.
Yeah, I mean, I do get a lot of eye roll, that's for sure. Something that you have to, and especially because when you were not plant-based or you were never talking about it, and it's also like the voice that you have. Like a few years ago, nobody really knew me because it was new. And then now you get a little more like, your voice is a little stronger. People are like, wow, I never heard you talking about it because I never had the voice. And it's like a lot of problem and I do feel you have to use the voice that you get, like when you believe in something or when you try to change things.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely a lot of pushback. When I post stories on Instagram, I get like, oh, like, fuck off with your vegan and like stop. I mean, that's like pretty much like all the time. Or if I do post a meal that I have that is not vegan, then I get the whole like, oh, well, that's not vegan. So it's just like, and that's always, and I'm like, yes, it's not. And I'm not, I never said that I was completely vegan. I said that I was adding veganism to my diet. And that's the difference.
Very, very, very different. And I think just that dynamic where you are advocating for plant-based, but then you do share something that is animal protein and then getting shamed for that only kind of perpetuates this like discomfort around changing our diet. And I think for me, I've been very explicit to be like, I'm not full vegan. I have a few practices around my diet that I try to follow of at least one vegan meal a day. And it's rare that I'll have like chicken. It's rare that I'll have even when I did eat meat, I wasn't a huge fan of red meat. I like rarely would have burgers in the first place. But I think just as I'm even thinking that part through, I want to talk about like the changes in your body that you start to recognize as well. Like as I think about when I did used to eat burgers, I would feel so drained. Yeah. I would feel like so just, I don't know, I guess a little like icky and a little heavy, and that didn't feel very good.
No, for sure. I mean, like, I completely agree. And that's what people say, like, oh, you're going to be lacking of, and you're going to feel this, and you're going to feel that. Well, I've lost already like 24 pounds. Not like I was like huge, but like I'm a big body, but I've already lost.
You're very tall.
Yeah, so it doesn't really show. So, I've lost like 24 pounds. I used to drink a lot of coffee, which made me feel like horrible. I pretty much stopped drinking coffee, but I'm not tired. You know, I don't feel weaker.
Yeah.
My body as a whole, I mean, like, you know, I'm like over 30 now, so like everything aches. But that being said,
not because of your diet.
No, exactly. And if anything, I mean, like, I have to say, like, I do feel so much better. Like, I feel like I can, like, I don't know, I sound like a fucking grandpa, but but I mean, like, you know, I do things easier.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like, so it has nothing to do with the diet because I can go, like, I go with no coffee and then still be up at 9 and up until 2 a.m. You know what I mean? So I think it's like everything. Once you like put your brain to it, things starting to happen.
Yeah. It's interesting. As we talk about like moving to be plant-based, there's several other areas within that I think just are attributed to this category of health, where discussing sober lifestyle, discussing, you know, not drinking coffee, and that, in my opinion, all of these things really help contribute positively to our health and help provide, you know, us with a clearer mind. And I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about just like the emotional experience of all of this. I guess primarily the plant-based piece, but then I do definitely want to talk about the coffee piece and the mocktail piece.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's something actually that I talked about. I did an interview not so long ago regarding like the book and then like the plant-based, and people were like hitting me on the health part, and were asking me, so is it like healthier to eat plant-based? And I'm like, well, it's like everything. You got to be very careful, like how you eat, and you know, like I was just like, you don't have to associate the two automatically. You can have protein-based diet and be super healthy, and on the other hand have a vegan diet and like be like have like a lot of health issues, because like if you eat candy or you eat like chocolate or like whatever cake, you're still gonna like get bigger, and you're still gonna have like heart disease and whatnot, right? So also being very careful with how to put vegan and health together. I think it's like automatically associated, and it's very wrong.
Yes.
But again, it's because people don't talk about it enough. So
yeah.
But yeah, come back to the emotional aspect about food. I mean, like, obviously being French, where food is so important in our culture, being a guy as well, where you expected to, again, like, eat like a lot of meat. You definitely have to kind of like, again, it's like being in your head and like being strong about it and be like, it's okay. You know what I mean? Like, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with not drinking coffee. I'm okay with not eating meat as much, because at the same time, like, I'm content with the food that I have. But I think it's also very important to cook the food that you still want. And people think, oh, you're having tofu and kale for lunch and dinner. I'm like, no, I don't. I mean, there's so many different things. And that's why I wanted to write a book, because I've been asked so many times, I would like to go plant-based, but like I don't really know what to cook, or like I feel like I'm kind of like stuck within like 3 options. And I'm like, okay, so let me show you a way to make delicious recipe. There are no like mock-offs, which I hate, like the chickenless or like whatever, those things that are like imitating like regular food. I'm like, I think this is a bigger problem. Like, you just stop it. Like, you know, eat like stuff the way it's supposed to be looking like. And I think you just like fall in love with it. You know what I mean? And you're happy with it, and you're content. It's yummy, and I think you don't have to suffer from like changing your diet. And you know, and you just like the people that are around you, tell them like, well, I'm cooking vegan today, or you don't tell them, you just cook vegan for them. And then after the meal, you're like, oh yeah, by the way, this is vegan. And then they're like, whoa. Exactly. And I think that's the approach. I mean, like, again, back to the child, like kind of like analogy. I think you have to be cautious, and people are just like, well, wasn't that bad?
Yeah, I think what I hear the most from that emotional journey piece is having some kindness towards yourself and really staying true, having that kind of dedication to your value change. And I think it's interesting, the chickenless kind of stuff, like the mock meat. I think there are ways that can be delicious, but a lot of it is also just filler, and it's just nothing.
It's really bad.
Yeah, and I think people draw blanks quite frequently on how to even eat vegetarian because they're so used to these specific staples being used in their diet every day that it's like, well, how do you make things without that? And then it's not going to taste as good and all of that. And I think for me, that's where I always say it's an experience. Like, it's not an overnight flip and change.
Definitely
and
not.
It's not about subtracting things from your diet. And I think that's where people look at it as this, like, they're suffering, that they're like having to eat vegetarian. But I think it's a lot more about this addition, right? Of like introducing yourself to new different kinds of produce, like kohlrabi. I remember like when I first realized that, I was like, what in the world is this? I was like, how do I use this? Like, is this even going to taste good? And it really, you have to get in touch with this like creative part of yourself,
yes, 100%.
Which I think can be a really great emotional process and a really fulfilling journey, because then you are in a way rewarded. And I want to be careful about using food as reward because that can lead to some other challenges, but it feels like this, there's a satisfaction after that creativity and that time and that energy has been put in to then actually eat something that that you've created in alignment with your values, that you feel is sustainable, that you feel is ethical, and that also is delicious. And then the extra bonus, if you feed it to your friends who don't like vegan or plant-based food, and then they're like, haha, it's vegan.
No, for sure. And I think it's like, at the end of the day, it's like talking about emotion, I think it's self-love. And like eating, it's like being in a relationship, really.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been stuck on a relationship where they went on for too long, and then you're not really being yourself, but you're being like kind of like a shadow of yourself, and you know, like loving you, but you're stuck in it. And I think it's a bit the same thing when you're like, once you like have a lot more self-love and you self-date yourself, you know, and that's a new thing. Like, it's not being single, but like self-dating.
Self-partnered.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think at first it hit me. And I was just like, yes, absolutely. I mean, like, I'm not alone. I'm actually rediscovering myself. And it comes with love. It comes with going to the gym, taking care of your body, taking care of your skin, taking care of like literally like starting to love yourself, and you just realize that you're much happier because you're not trying to please someone else, but you try to please you, and everything kind of come like just like smoothly. So, and I think it's the same with food. You know, I mean, like it's another element of the whole like I don't know, like that whole like take care of yourself first.
Absolutely. I want to just give some snaps for that. 'Cause that was so true and so great. And speaking of, you know, just the self-love process and thinking about the dating process, I want to chat a little bit about the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about you is you've also been like really outspoken and have been like a huge advocate for women in the restaurant industry. And I was a hostess for like maybe 2 months.
Yeah. That's already, you can experience a lot in these 2 months.
Yeah, and I say like I haven't had any real restaurant experience, but I also don't think I'm totally blind to it. But there's also a lot I don't know, and so I'm excited to kind of hear a little bit more from you, as I've seen you talk about it a little bit on your Instagram, of just what this sexism looks like in the restaurant industry.
Yeah. Well, I think there's two parts to it. The first part is that whole like men against or versus women, where like they think they're more like empowered because of the title.
Yeah.
Because yes, you obviously as a chef or as like a manager, let's say, you have more power because it's the way it is. It's this industry. It's very rough. You might yell. You might just like show authority, and it's accepted. That's one thing. But I think that power kind of like transgressed to like more of a like sexual, and then like it's almost like you're allowed to say, oh, you're beautiful, or like, oh, like I'm automatically think like I can pick you up whenever I want because I'm the chef, or I'm the sous chef, or I'm like a manager. So there's that aspect where I think it's almost like degrading, where as a manager you think you have like power to literally do whatever you want. And it's like grabbing like one of your server ass or boobs, and which is completely not okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, in like people's head, it's like, oh well, we are in the hospitality restaurant industry, so like it's okay. And I think that's one of the biggest like issue. Now there's another problem. It's like the treatment of in the kitchen. That's what I'm going to talk about because it's a little different in the restaurant industry, but like in the kitchens. there's really like, what is male and is like female. I'm not going to say man and woman. I'm really going to say male and female because it's really how it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yes, I have to say male have been promoted a lot more for years. It used to be a more like male-oriented industry, but it's not true anymore.
Yeah.
There's as many girls as this guy in kitchens. The talent is like equal or better. The best chef in the world right now, it's a woman. She's 28 from Mexico. So it's not like Europe and white and like a guy. So which made me super happy.
Yeah.
I think I've always, like in terms of hiring, I never looked at like, oh, is it like a guy or a girl? I'm like, you're good or you're not, period. Yeah. So my kitchen always been like very equal or sometimes more women. And that's what I say in my post. I'm like, doesn't mean there's more drama at all. If anything, quite the opposite. Like guys are the worst in the kitchen. But yeah, I think it's like little things. Like when one of my managers gonna call one of my cook like sweetie or sweetheart or like I'm like, you don't call like Frank sweetheart, you call him Frank. Well, like you should call Mary. And yes, Mary can carry a bag of flour. You don't need to like run. You know what I mean? She'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's how like it's not being looked as sexism, but it is. No one should ever be like called by sweet names. I mean, this is reserved for your partner or your family. Again, this is very like using that like power or like using that like male like dominance, which is completely wrong. Yeah. And I think it's changing. I mean, I've cut it off. I mean, at least in my workplace, I think it's very safe to be in an environment where like the chef is like kind of like empowering women.
Yeah.
And in general, like being against sexism. It's something that I'm very vocal about, which I think helps. And then when you're not going to work for me if you don't believe anything I'm saying, right? Or you're just an idiot. But I think it's bad. And I don't want to say it's only because I've had like dated girls that are like were not from the industry, like either like in banks or like in like whatever it is, different like segment, and the problems are the same. I think it's just that whole relationship, like men empowered to like women that are like under in a hierarchy, and it comes back all the time. So like I don't want to say it's only there, but like I know it's a thing. But at least if somebody, I mean, if I can use my voice again to talk about it, then I'll be very happy. And again, I'm sure I'll get backstabbed, and I'm sure I'll get eye rolls, and I'm sure I'll get like, oh, he's not one of us. But I don't really care. So it is what it is.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, one of the thoughts I'm thinking is when you think like gender roles and stereotypes, most people are like, yeah, the woman's in the kitchen, right? Like historically, that's the stereotype. But when it comes to it actually being like a professional thing and having this power and having this almost like elitism to it, it is male dominated. And I find that really interesting.
It's true. I mean, it really is like backward and even within like, I hear that all the time, people are like, oh, women should be in the kitchen and blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, I'm in the kitchen. And I'm happy to do it.
Yeah.
And I think, I think it's part of like the evolution and like how you are as a human being. You know what I mean? You have the option to be better. You have the option to like smarten up and look at what's going on and look what's around you and then change the way you think. Like it's available, like you can't blame, oh, well, I didn't know. Like, no, it's available for you. Literally, you can go on the internet or you can just talk to people. I always say, like, if you're like the smarter person in a room, then there's something wrong. So I think it's just about like educating yourself and just like stop being like literally don't ruin your life with all the cliche. I don't hear that as often, the whole like woman in the kitchen, like not as much as I used to. But it's true. I mean, it's very different, but it's true. I think it's again based on like elitism and like how like chef have turned from like idiots to like literally rock stars.
They've been like they're celebrities now.
Literally, which I'm like very happy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there's no
you're in that category too, so
there's no complaint on my part. But I think at the same time, I shouldn't just be like, oh well, let's just like use that like male dominant power and then like crush everything and be like, let's just be different and let's have a different approach. And again, if I get like little like like on my way, I get people that are not happy with me. I always say if you like can make people talk, either good or bad, it's a good thing. There's movement and there's a progress, so I'm okay with it.
Very true. And We're going to switch gears just a little bit, because I think this is a topic a lot of people will want to hear about, and something that I've received a lot of questions on and haven't really shared on the pod, but alcohol.
Yep.
Huge part of the restaurant industry.
Oh, God. Yes, absolutely.
I feel like it is most of the income of the restaurant industry.
Yeah, no, it is. Again, it's so available. It's like there's those rules that have been made up in the industry where, like, oh, well, if you're manager, you're allowed to have a drink after each services.
Yeah.
Okay. Or like every Saturday night is beer night, so everybody gets a beer. So I think it's very present, and as a manager, so on the restaurant, literally alcohol is like right there. So I say I'm one of the only person that I know in this industry that doesn't drink, that doesn't smoke.
Yeah.
I mean, I do drink, but like socially. So I don't do drugs.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like all these like vices that are very present in my industry, I don't do, which kind of like again allows me to be like, no, this is not okay, or like this is not going to fly with me, whatnot. But alcohol is like, I would say, the biggest one, and it's almost like, oh well, I'm a chef. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm a chef. And I mean, like it's borderline like that.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm a chef. I'm allowed to drink. I'm stressed. I'm like, yes. So what? So yeah, it's a big, it's definitely a big topic.
And when for you did you kind of step away from drinking? Like you said, you drink socially,
Yes.
but what does that look like?
I mean, like, let's say if I go on a date or I'm with friends, I'll have a glass of wine, I'll have a cocktail. And don't get me wrong, like some nights I might have like 4 cocktails. But like over the period of the year, it's like very, very low because I'm not super social, first of all. So there's that part that reduce it. Like I don't drink at home, like unless it's like a dinner date, and then I'll have for sure a couple of glasses of wine. But like I don't go like, I mean, like I don't remember the last time I was actually like, wow, I don't think I ever had. No, I probably have been blackout drunk when I was like 17.
Yeah.
And I mean, I used to drink a lot when I first started. Because I was 16, 17, we were clubbing until 6 a.m. It was just that life, right? But then, like 20s came around. It was like, all right, I'm done with this. Since then, I've never really been a huge drinker. And then, like I say, sometimes I'm happy just to have a glass of water or to have a mocktails. I mean, it's just, I don't need to drink to be. Yeah. I think it's that, like, again, connotation, like, oh, well, I'm not social, but at the same time, I'm very social. Like, I mean, I have no issue chatting or whatever. Yeah. So, like, I don't need a glass of wine or a cocktail to get me going. So that also help. And I don't want to say, like, I understand if people need that to get going and they have a drink. This is absolutely okay. But there's a difference between one drink and then, piling up once.
Definitely a strong difference there. I know for me, like as a woman, I definitely get a ton of pushback from people when I am out at a bar or out dancing about the fact that I'm not drinking, or even like at parties. And I don't know. When it comes to dating, everyone I've ever dated has drank. I'm somewhat talking to someone now who doesn't drink, and that's the first time I've ever like been romantically and sexually interested and involved with someone who doesn't drink. Yeah. And I'm curious for you, as you kind of drink less and are just more intentionally and mindfully drinking, how that has impacted like dating.
Yeah, it's kind of weird actually, because like you're with people that girls that would like literally get wasted, and I'm just like, well, like it's great, but like I'm not really like into this anymore. You know what I mean? Because you're not like in the vibe.
Yeah. I'm sorry, that's like not a quality date, and I don't think like unless even if you're just looking to like go out to just hook up and like you just want to like get drunk so you can hook up, like I've never understood that, and it's such a vulnerable, intimate space. It's not sexy, and it's unfortunately the norm, I think, in hookup culture, and especially when people are first starting out having sex with each other and experimenting with that kind of stuff. But I really hope that conversations like this help change that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's like everything we've been talking. It's all about like what's been like set by the society. You know what I mean? And like why do you have to drink? And again, you mentioned something. It's like how you're not drinking and you get to push back. Imagine as a guy when so I think it was my 30th birthday. Was it my 30th? One of my biggest I think it was my 30th. My friend was just like, we're getting drunk tonight. And I was just like, no, we're not. And he was just like, yeah, we are. It's your 30th. Like, it has to happen. And I'm like, I will have definitely a couple drinks. Yeah. But if you want to get drunk, like, be my guest. I'm not judging. I have zero problem with it. Yeah. But you will not get me drunk. Yeah. And then, like, I have had, like, friends like, okay, we have to try him to get him drunk. It's almost like, it's funny because it's like an objective now from them to just get me, like, wild and, like, drunk. So, but that one time you drink a bottle of gin, I'm like, yeah, that one time. Yeah. Not saying that I'm a saint, but at the same time, when you're like, I'm not going to drink tonight, people are like, oh, what is wrong with this guy? And what is wrong? I'm like, nothing is wrong. I'm okay.
Yeah. Yeah, like, we're okay. We're good. Exactly. That's, like, always what I have to say to people. I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, really,
sick?
Like, you don't have to worry about me. Like, I'm really fine with this decision. But I think it's interesting because that objective then, right, to, like, get you to drink, it has a certain level of playfulness, but it also, I think, speaks a lot larger to just the whole social piece of drinking, where other people do become really uncomfortable when someone in the group is not drinking and not joining that. And I think, in addition to that, something that's really important that you said was, you know, when they're saying, like, we're going to get so drunk tonight, and you're like, well, you guys can, but, like, I'm not. Yeah. I think that piece is also super important because I think a lot of people assume that because you don't drink that you're going to, you know, maybe convince, right? Yeah. Like, try to have that influence on other people like we do with food to not drink. But there's also, at least a big piece for me, I'm like, I've never been like, yeah, you should not drink alcohol too. Like, it'd be just like me.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I'm like, it's totally a personal preference, but I do encourage and I do advocate and I do try to convince people to drink intentionally and mindfully and to be aware of when they are abusing it and to be aware of when they are using it to numb and all of those things.
No, for sure. I think it's like I wouldn't say, I mean, you know, like the food aspect, it's more like saving the planet, almost borderline. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or like, listen, if you want to drink your mind out, like nothing's going to change. Well, I mean, like unless you're in a car and then that's another subject. But if you're going to walk home, then we're okay. You know what I mean? Like the safety, the planet is going to be just fine. Yeah. So yeah, I would not ever convince someone to not drink unless it's like it's like a health reason and health issues. But yeah, I mean, like you don't have. I mean, I never understood that culture. Like you have to drink your mind out, or even like when you're on a date, or I don't know, like the whole vibe changing. I think also I want to say, that's why I don't want to say like I'm a little different. And I think you're the same way. Like I think it's confidence. And again, back to self-love. When you're confident with it, with your choices. And then like I was like, listen, I mean, like if I want to have sex with you, like I don't need to drink my mind out of it, or like I can talk to you without a drink, and I'm confident with my choice. And if you judge me for not drinking and you think it's like like lame, then maybe you should just go home now. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with it, and I'm not like you know. And I think it's. I don't know. It's true. It's a lot of these subjects that we're talking about are kind of like new, and like I think it's always like changing people's like way of thinking, and it's like taboo and cliche, and then, like we don't want to talk about it. Like I don't want to be that person, and it sucks. Yeah. But
yeah, I'm thinking about it from your perspective, right? Like if I were a dude, a guy, a man, and as a woman, when a guy finds out I don't drink and we're like out on a date or whatever, usually he does admit some discomfort, and then it's a little conversation, but then we just go about the evening as normal. But I do notice that usually it is a little different, especially in long-term relationships, because they are used to being able to have some kind of like drunk sex, right? Or just like sometimes having that like messy, drunken, tipsy, like make out or whatever. And for me, I'm like, yeah, like I can still do those things, but like I'm not going to be drunk for them. And I don't feel any kind of shame from them, but I do realize that it's a different dynamic for them.
For sure.
And I'm trying to put myself in the man's perspective and like what you would encounter, what you would experience from a woman. If there's like that pushiness, if you feel like there's an attempt to demasculate at all, or like what that dynamic comes out as.
Yeah, I mean, like I've never like felt it personally. I mean, like, and on the reverse, like if I'm with someone and then like I'm not drinking, I will be like, you know what, and I'm okay, I don't have to drink. And that's where I do get like, oh no, but like you can drink. Like,
that's what I do.
Yeah, and I'm like, no, but like I don't want to. I mean, like I don't like to drink by myself. Do not feel bad about about it because
Yeah.
like, I'm okay not drinking, or maybe I'll have one just to say like I had one.
Yeah. But see, then why do we do that then, right? Like that is most guys that I end up dating who do drink then drink a lot less when they date me, and they say those things like, yeah, I would prefer to not drink, like I would if you were having one, but like we don't need to. But then it's like, well, then why would you have one then?
Yeah, but I think it's like it's back to like social drinking, right? I mean, like because I don't drink for the sake of drinking, and I drink socially. If like I don't have the like social like encounter, then I'm not really like looking to drink because I don't need to. Again, I don't need to. It's not like I go out, I need to have a drink, I need to, you know what I mean? Like, and then blah, 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 right? It's like, there's no, like, when I do something, there's no, like, a map. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to always be the same. And I mean, like, I'm okay with it. But I think because I usually you guys are like, well, whatever, man, just gonna keep drinking. I think I get that, like, little bit, like, awkwardness for a little bit. I'm like, hey, like, trust me, like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
But no, I never, and again, like, I've never, I think there's a different way of like being a man or being a woman and showing that. Like if it's a woman to show like her, like she's smart and she's like beautiful and like doesn't mean you need to do anything. You can just be yourself. And I think as a man, I don't need to, like alcohol to show like I'm a man and like I'm masculine and like I can be strong and I can be like taking care and provide and whatever bullshit.
Yes.
But I think, I mean, like, it's just like, no, trust me, like I'll be a man and like if we do have sex, I'll show you that I'm still a man. You know what I mean? And there's no need to be in the alcohol for that, right? I think it's just
absolutely. And I think like while you may not be fully sober lifestyle, I do think that is so important because for some of our male listeners too, like I do think that those are insecurities that might come up.
Yeah,
and
I think that's the best word. I think it's insecurities and confidence for sure.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know, for me, like currently, it has been really interesting because the person I talk to now, like they don't drink, and it's different. It's a very different
dynamic for sure.
Yeah. But I don't think that there's anything that's super lacking there, and so far it feels nice.
Yeah, I think it's like every relationship. Like, I don't think you need to have like, oh, well, you tick that box and you tick that box. I think this is another problem. It's just like when you date, it's almost like, as a guy, I'm like, okay, she needs to have a good job, or she needs to make that much money, or she, like, why? I mean, like, I'm like, you take as it is in a relationship. People are like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm that way. I'm like, listen, like, I'm with you. So if I'm with you, it's like for who you are as a person. I don't want you to change anything. I don't want you to be different. If it works out. If it doesn't work out, it's not because like who you were. It's just because like the whole relationship wasn't working. But it should never be about the other one, and should never be about like, oh, I could have like done this or done that. And that's it. I mean, if it's different, it's different. You know what I mean? It's just like, I think, you don't have to, people overthink.
Yes.
And I'm
right here.
Trust me.
Here, overthinker.
I'm an overthinker too. Knowingly, I know what I am, and I know it's wrong.
Yeah.
But
and then you can
yourself.
know, you're like, I'm overthinking this right now. It's not only overthinking, but having the awareness of the overthinking.
Exactly. I think that's like halfway progression. You know what I mean? It's just like, I know I'm crazy, but at least I'm crazy, but I know I'm crazy, so that makes it like half okay.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the apologizing, like, I'm sorry that I'm this way, whatever, does make me sad. And I think a lot of what is difficult about when people do go through breakups is questioning if I had been different, would it have worked? And I think it is super helpful to center yourself with this concept that holds a lot of truth, right? That it's not necessarily about who you were, but it's about the dynamic that we had
timing,
together.
And, like I was saying, I mean, a relationship 5 years before now, 5 years later, it could be completely different, right? It's because like what's happening in my life right now, what's happening in your life right now makes it that it's a little more difficult. And like timing is everything. I mean, there's just no, it's just the way it is. And you have to accept it. And you know what I mean? Like it sucks, but I mean, you can't change anything about that.
Speaking of timing though, you are a chef. You are working on a cookbook. You have a very busy schedule. And I think a lot of people have busy schedules, but I imagine chef life to just be like utter chaos, like all the time. So in general, I usually ask people like how they manage, like how they balance work life and also I guess dating in that as well. But how do you as a chef, like, and doing all these other things, like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's again, you have to be very committed to relationship, and you have to be very like honest and truthful when you meet someone. Like, my life is like shit.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't
it's great, but there's a lot of
but
shit
there's no. I mean, if you're about routine, then let's just not even like try. I think your partner has to be very understanding of like what's going to look like, but at the same time, you also have to, and I think this is the problem. It's like, it's like adapted on the chef, but like you have to look at the other. I mean, like maybe my life is crazy, but maybe yours is too. Like, why is my life like weirder than yours?
Yeah.
So if you're doing 9 to 5, it's your schedule and that's how you are, and then I have to respect it and I have to understand it. Now, I think it's for like a strong relationship, I think you need to understand each other. I think you need to respect their life, and I think you need to commit probably like a day, a week to like be together. And and that's what I had done when I was in relationships, where it was like, okay, you're not gonna get all of me like from Tuesday to Saturday per se, but like on Sunday it's our day, and then our phones are off, and then we can just be together.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like how you keep it like sane almost. I think it was harder before when I was more of a cook, and like you can't be on your phone. You work crazy hours and then you go home, you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Being a chef was a little bit different because you're allowed to have your phone because you work from it. So it allows you to text a little more, which I think, like texting your partner or like emailing your partner to kind of like, I always say, I was just like, I don't have to tell you I love you every day, but I can like show you that I'm thinking about you. And I think it's like little notes just like, hey, I hope you made it home okay. I hope that you have a good night with your girlfriends or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's how you...
I'm a total sucker for that kind of shit.
Yeah, I think I always say, I was like, I don't think like saying I love you, there's so many different ways. I'm like, I hope you get home safe, or like, I hope your day goes well. I hope your meeting went well. I think there's a lot of things to like, I'm thinking about you. I can't talk to you, but it doesn't mean on my mind. And I think that's kind of like how you can like carry it over. Now that I have like attained like a more of a like celebrity status, it's very different.
Yeah.
You have to be super careful of like who's like want to be with me, and then like who just want to like just want to be with me just because it's like, well, fuck that guy, pretty much.
Yeah. They shouldn't be able to say that they were with you, but not necessarily care or feel connected to you or get to know you.
And I think that's where like it's you have to be very careful, and this is where you have to see people what they want, and it's almost like a completely different game. That being said, I can make my own schedule. So I can make a lot more time from before when I was just like, sorry, like it's that day or nothing. Yeah. You can adapt, and I think that makes like dating a little bit easier. But at the same time, it makes it worse because I have to be like very cautious and like making sure I'm not being trapped. Yeah.
Oof. I have so many thoughts around this. There's so many thoughts around it. Okay, the one thing I'll ask that I think is maybe also relevant for listeners, because it overall speaks to this idea of being used, and of, in our situation, it's because of like our status and who we are. But I think on an everyday level, there are reasons why people would use someone, whether it's for perhaps your network at work, or perhaps it's, something in the community that you're involved in. But how do you know when someone is perhaps just trying to date you because of your status?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also, again, it's very new. So I know I've been trapped before, and then I didn't know. And I think it's also based on like what we talked about earlier, is like to know yourself first. And then once I think you're very strong about like what you want and what you stand for and your values, and then what you're going to go with, I think you become a little more aware and smarter, and then kind of like see and read people's like bullshit. Yeah. And I think you can tell. I think it's just like the approach. Like I think it's hard for people to be genuine for like a long time.
Yeah. So taking it a little slow at first.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. I think not rushing into anything, understanding the difference between a hookup and like a relationship. And again, I mean, like, everybody's going to use, I mean, like, I'm not against, and that sounds weird, but like, I'm not against like using people.
Yeah.
I think
I get what you mean.
It's absolutely fine as long as it's harmless, right? It's like, as long as, you know what, like, I don't know, I'm going to use you to get a promotion, or I'm going to use you to, I don't know, like get into that party. That's cool. Doesn't hurt anybody.
Yeah.
Like no one was harmed. Absolutely. If anything, it's just like show that you're smart.
Yeah.
So I have no issue with that. I think it's when like, well, it's like you think about, I want to be with that person, but not because of who they are, but because of like what I want out of this, and I can gain status, and I can gain this, and I gain that. I think this is where it's like it's toxic.
Yeah.
And at first you don't really like. I think like I've been in that relationship and I didn't really see it, and it sucks. But you know what, you get out of it, and you're like, I've learned my lesson, and you don't. I mean, like now I'm not rushing into anything. I'm very much like kind of like, I'm not going to fall for you. I'm going to like try to be like very careful and try to see. And then I think, like I say, it's like everyone. When you put a mask on, like it's very hard to keep it for like that long. Eventually, your true colors will show.
Yeah.
But you have to be aware. I think you cannot be like drawn and completely like in love right away, because this is where like shit's gonna like start to happen.
That's hard. That's hard to not feel that in the beginning.
Absolutely. Which is exactly that's the one time when you would think like, okay, well, this is like butterfly and then you know, like rainbows. And this is where you have to be like, but hold on a second, right? I mean, like maybe I should just be a little cautious. But I think like within a couple of weeks, I think you'll know like, you don't want to. I don't play games. I don't think you should ever play games. But I think there's ways of like showing that you're like available, not available, or like showing like a little bit of resistance, and then usually these people kind of like vanish very easily.
Yeah, and I notice for me at least that when there's so much of an emphasis on my network and on my business, that is where for me I kind of get a little bit of a red flag, right? Where it's like, perhaps more of the relationship is spent on focused on your status in some way. And that's kind of a hint to know that maybe this person is just hyper focused on this aspect of you, but isn't looking at the whole picture of you. And then when you are showing the whole picture of you, they are then perhaps pushing back on that, or they are then trying to give you criticism, which they think is feedback, but it's actually criticism. And in a way, really just attempting to change you. Yeah. And I think over time, you do get to see if someone is actually accepting you for you, or if they are trying to mold you into what they want you to be. Yeah,
100%. And I think it comes to like, again, like when you gain a status, so when you start to get like attention and stuff like that. I think it's hard at the beginning. I mean, for me, it was hard at the beginning. I was kind of like, not like starstruck with myself, but kind of, you know, you kind of like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I think once you pass that, like, where you just accept it, that was just like, things going to be different now. Like I will have to, not like you get recognized, but like, you know, like on social media, or like to events, and people look at you very differently.
Yeah.
I think once you accept that, it's just like, it's great, it's awesome. I mean, like, I don't want ever to stop. Yeah. But at the same time, like, you're not better than, I'm not better than you, you're not better than me, and vice versa. Once you accept that, I think you can look at a relationship easier, and it's just like, you don't have to flaunt and your status to kind of like get to your partner. And I think when you have that like mutual like appreciation, I feel like also like it's easier.
Totally. And I think, that's one thing that you get to that place with, perhaps your new promotion at your job, or the fact that you like run the radio station or the news show or whatever it is. That's one thing for you to be in a comfortable place with that. But I think once that becomes your norm, and then you're dating and you meet people outside of that, that's not their norm. Yes. And already in the beginning, right, when you have chemistry, there's already both of you are already just shiny things to each other, right? But then when you're also in that situation with some kind of a status, that you become this extra, extra shiny thing. Yeah. And I think it's, in a way, I definitely feel like I carry myself as like, I'm just me, but I also have these other parts of my life, and I just talk about them like they're just normal, because it's just like, that's just what it is.
Exactly.
But also having this awareness when you are talking with someone perhaps new that you're dating, or a friend that like doesn't know that part of you, of being hyper aware of their reactions when you are doing that. Because for me, how they react to that gives me a sense of if I'm now being put up on a pedestal, or if I am now being like romanticized in some way, and that feels like, okay, you're now getting to know a different person that's not fully me, and that's going to really change
me.
That's going to really change our dynamic.
Yes, I agree.
gosh, there's so much more I could say on this topic overall.
No, it's true. And I think what I've tried to do is just like, it's not like expose my relationship, but kind of like hide it and like keep some privacy because there's so much bullying. There's so much like people getting jealousy, people that want to get with you, people that want to get with your partner, people that want what you have. That I feel like people, there's like trolls and like cyberbullying, and then people like create like website and talk shit about you.
Yeah,
and
Reddit's a scary place.
Right? So exactly, that I didn't mention the site, but that's the one. And you're just like, okay, so this is where I think you have like, personally, I'm more about like hiding my relationship. Like you can't really hide it, but not like expose it, not like flaunt it and be like, this is us, blah, blah, blah. This is what we do. Look at us. We're so cute, because I think you're exposing yourself to creating a life within your life.
Yeah.
And where like there's a relationship, and there's a relationship that people like are allowed to kind of like entertain out there. And I think this is where it can become very dangerous for you and for your partner. And like as you said before, I think your partner has to understand like the cool things are just normal to us now. And then we should never, like, they should never see us as like, oh my God, like, it's so cool. Like, you know what I mean? I think it's very important to be like, you know what, it's not that cool. You don't need to come. Like, it's nothing really, to kind of like dim it down. And I think it's just being humble too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I agree with you on parts, and on other parts, I think I have a very different approach. And I think just in regards to the like cool thing, I do think I try really hard to always practice being like, this is like, I get to do this. Like, I get to have this experience. And like, I really appreciate that. And when I am with someone who sees those things as cool, it helps me remember that, right? And have that humbleness. But you also, don't want it to be this like overly hyped up thing on their end that like puts you in this unrealistic category. But in regards to the like hiding piece, I've only had like one serious relationship post Bachelor, which was someone also in the spotlight, and so that makes sense. But that one relationship, and that's how I know you. But I started off that relationship hiding that, right, from social media. And people, I think, on certain layers of it, found it quite annoying because people wanted to know like who I was dating and what he looked like, what he did, what our relationship was like. And that was something really important for people. And granted, my viewership is a little different than yours and their values on that. But on one hand, I appreciated the privacy because I felt like I was able to just fully be in it and not have these other distractions. But on the other hand, it did feel a little inauthentic, right? To not be sharing that this was a big part of my life. And granted, yes, you then do invite trolls and comments, judgment, and you get all this shit. And that's like, okay, now I have to figure out how to sort through that and like what I do allow myself to absorb and what I don't. And after all of that, like, now I feel like I'm taking this different approach where now I feel like I don't want it to have to be I'm hiding it, and I don't want it to have to be that I'm like big revealing anything either, right? Because you don't want it to have all this pressure. I mean, even like for people, I don't know if this still exists because I don't really use Facebook anymore, but like going Facebook official, right? Like that was a big moment. Like, are we going to be Facebook official? Like that's like how you really validate the relationship, right? And I think there are ways you can have your relationship be validated that don't include, public announcements, right? But let's be real, that's a huge part of our society now.
For sure. And I mean, like, you completely right. And I completely agree with you. Like when I meant hiding, it was like maybe like a strong word. I think it's more like not being as forward about like literally everything. And I think that's how I was in my previous relationship where it was like literally everything was exposed. And I changed to be like, you know what, like that person exists. Like she's here, you know who she is. But I would not be like and again, like I think it's not fair for the other person also to be like, well, she was like, well, I want people to know who I am because I mean like, not because of who you are, but because like we're together and then it's only fair to me. So I agree with you. I think I think it's not fair not to talk about it. It's not fair to be like, well, why do my status has to like hurt my relationship in a way? Why can't I just be open about it?
Yeah.
I think it's true. I think it's scary. I think some days I'm like, no, like I could have my Instagram completely like locked from emotions. And some days I'm like, yeah, but it's not very being true to my followers. And I mean, like I'm lying to them. So, you know, I think it's like, but I agree with you. I mean, like you shouldn't like, if you want to, I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to do something, you should do it. That's just like my motto. I was just like, there should be no like, oh, what if?
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Ugh. I have so many thoughts on this, but we'll have to wrap up for today. Super appreciate this entire conversation around not only, you know, our food systems and our diets and how we go about that, but also to, you know, opening up about sexism in the restaurant industry and also just lots of dating stuff that I wasn't fully expecting, but I appreciate your openness.
Of course.
And if people want to kind of follow you and check you out, you have a really exciting cookbook coming out that I'm super excited for, and I want like more and more of these kinds of cookbooks out. Do you want to share a little bit about kind of what makes it special?
Yeah, well, I think it's, you know, it's like it's will be called a vegan bridge because again, it's not like a book that is made for vegan, but it's a book that's made for vegan, yes, but also for carnivore that are looking to change their ways and to kind of like make peace between the two worlds, because there's been like a lot of like, you know, protests and whatnot between, and I think it's like, no, guys, like we're cool, you know what I mean? So I think it's what the book's around. It talks about sustainability, it talks about, a new way of living and delicious recipes. Yeah.
I'm super excited for it. And people can follow you on Instagram at
Chef Romain Avril.
Yes.
So very, I think if you type Chef Romain, usually like there's only one. So it's pretty straightforward. And I do have a website, which is chefromainavril.com. Being super original. So yeah.
Consistent. I like it.
Well, exactly, right? It's like easy to find me. So I mean like, love to chat, and I'm very good at actually like a lot of people are messaging me regarding sexism, regarding veganism. So and I'm not one to just like ignore you. I mean like if there is like obviously like some proper material to talk about, I will be like happily share as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. All right, that does it for today's episode. Thank you so much for making it all the way through and keeping your ears, your hearts, and your minds open. It would mean so much to me if you could take a second or two after listening to this episode to leave a review on iTunes and let me know what you're enjoying about the show. I love reading, you know, what your favorite episodes are, where you guys listen, and definitely feel free to share this with a friend. I mean, part of how we break down the stigmas around these topics is by talking about them, right? And sharing them with more people. So definitely share the podcast. And again, really wanting to include all of you in this podcast. So if you have questions or you want to share a thought or an experience, please send in a voice memo to ask.letstalkaboutit@gmail.com. And I'm really excited to keep having these conversations and breaking down these stigmas. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next time.